Okay, today we will mainly take up testing of induction motors after completing the remaining portions of the starting of motors which we had covered in the last lecture. Okay. So, the two topics we will be discussing therefore are starting of induction motors and testing of induction motors. To recall, we have already covered several methods of starting, and one of the more popular in recent periods has been the use of electronic starting or AC voltage controllers, where we use a device called a thyristor, which is a power electronic switch. It is you can say a high power device, a 4-layer device, PNP device, and that works as a switch, and which can be turned on and off electronically, and it's called also a soft starter because you can smoothly start, and also it can also be programmed starting is possible. Then you can also have feedback signals can be used there, and you change the firing angle of the thyristor, keep it very high at start so that the voltage across the motor is low at start. And if you go on making the firing angle to be 0, when the firing angle 0, bulk of the voltage will come across the motor. Therefore, this way you are able to change the starting sequence from low voltage at start to full voltage at run conditions. Okay. You can also, as another method is the stator impedance control. So, in stator impedance control, you can correct an external impedance in each of the lines, and you cut it off when the motor reaches the speed. So, if this is the motor, you have impedance externally Z, and this can be varied, and Z is that Z reduces to 0 at run conditions. So, Z is full, that means here the voltage across the motor will depend upon the current flowing through them, because they drop across, because this will be the supply voltage. So, this supply voltage and the voltage across the motor will be varying as you change Z. Okay. So, this is in fact a simplest example in single phase system you can see is your fan regulator, because there are two types of fan regulator you are. One is a triac, which is a electronic type of regulator, another is this stator impedance controller. You connect a resistance in the regulator. At start you have full resistance, at run you cut off the whole resistance. So, this is the method that is used. One of the very cheapest method which are employed is called a part winding starting. That means in the winding itself you can have let us say you have 2 star windings or 2 delta windings. Okay. Now, let us say this is one set of winding, this is another set of winding. That means at start you only excite one, and in run condition you put 1 plus 2 in parallel. This is one of the method that is used. You break into 2 identical segments of windings. So, you are working with only part of the windings, and then so this way you can have some controlled starting, but it is the cheapest, because all you need is to have one small switch which will switch from a start winding to run winding. So, only part of the winding is used for start to limit your starting current and torque conditions. Okay. Because since only one parallel path is being used in start, current drawn by the mains will be less. On run, both parallel paths are being used, and the current run will be more. So that way you are limiting the current by sacrificing some torque. Okay. There is also another variant of this part winding as follows. You can have two parallel circuits, okay, and what they do is you can have in each phase you can have two parallel circuits, but in one phase only, because you don't disturb the two phases, so it becomes an unbalanced starting. So you can have in this you can have a series parallel starting. So you two windings are there, you connect them in series and start. Series in start means the voltage across each phase will be half of what it should be per phase voltage, and then in parallel at run. But you do it for only one phase so that your starting mechanism is simplest. Though it is an unbalanced starting, it is called an unbalanced starting because two are balanced and the third one is only you are creating an unbalance. But it doesn't matter, it will create some negative torque and still it does the job. Now these are the some of the different variants of starting methods which are used depending upon the application and rating of the motor. Okay. So these are the part winding starting. Next is called a clutch starting. Most of you may be aware of what is a clutch. Any vehicle has a clutch. Clutch has a purpose that we should disengage the clutch. That means the engine is not coupled to your wheels, and if you engage the clutch, your engine comes as a main drive for your vehicle. Okay? So that is now the procedure you can make it as a centrifugal clutch. Centrifugal clutch is the clutch will start engaging after certain speed because it works under centrifugal action. Okay, and you know centrifugal action is a speed dependent action. In higher speed there is centrifugal action will be there. So centrifugal clutch, and the coupling has inner part fixed to the motor and outer part to the load. So it has one part to the motor, another part to the load. That means only above certain speed the load comes into the picture. So at starting there is no load. So under running it is a load. So that is called a clutch starting. This way you are able to reduce the starting needs. The load comes on after it has reached the requisite speed. Okay. Therefore, the load gets engaged near run speed. This is the main criterion that you will use here. Okay. So the coupling, clutch coupling has a method to engage or disengage depending upon the speed. So in order to, the same thing is used, in fact this is being used in many of the thermal power plants, large motor start. But if you have a large motor to start, then it is preferable to start it with no load and run it with full load. Therefore they also have, apart from the clutch, one of the method is called a fluid coupling. The fluid coupling has also that feature like a clutch. That means it is made to the fluid coupling is a mechanical coupling in which one can bring in the load after it goes to the run speed or full speed. Okay. So what you are actually doing is as follows. Suppose you have the torque, general motor torque speed characteristics. Okay. Now the load characteristics will have two parts, right? This is the normal motor characteristics. So if it is no load, it may be just the friction torque, right? This is the no load. Opposing torque is like that when you don't connect any load. And if you have a load, load may have a much bigger. This is with load. Okay. Now what you notice is that the accelerating torque initially will be very high, because this will be the accelerating torque. So it is opposing torque will be this, okay, and after some speed, that means you are engaging this one. This is when your clutch is engaged. So this is the path that you will follow. So what will be accelerating torque? This will be the accelerating torque, the motor torque minus the load torque, but here accelerating torque will be smaller, because that is the difference between, because your load torque, opposing load torque will follow this path, isn't it? Initially this is opposing load torque, then it shifts here and goes there. Okay. So your accelerating torque, because your Tj or inertia torque will be T motor minus T load. This is T motor and this is T load. Okay. So you have a controlled starting that is possible, but very simple mechanical process. Okay. So this we call it as the clutch starting. Then there is one more method which has come more predominant in recent years, is to have a low frequency starting. All the methods so far has been normal frequency starting. You are not changing the frequency of the supply. So here you are reducing the frequency. Okay, that means here V by F is kept constant. Why? Because if you keep V by F constant, then the flux is constant. You would like to maintain the nominal flux. This is one thing that you will do. This is the procedure. Okay, V by F is kept constant, or the flux is constant here. Okay. Next, your frequency of a solid state inverter. This is electronical idea. You have a solid state inverter which varied from low value till rated value is reached. So you start from say 2 hertz, 3 hertz, 5 hertz, go to 50 hertz. And obviously your speed would change, because you know speed is dependent upon the frequency. So you have a low frequency. From low frequency you go to the nominal frequency, and throughout you also change the voltage. So the flux is maintained constant. At low frequency voltage is also reduced, so V by F is constant. So let's say if you are reached 25 hertz, you make the voltage to be half of the rated value, right, which was 50 hertz. Okay. Now this can also be automatic starting is possible. You can do electronic starting. RS nowadays is called a soft start, or even you can develop a software programs. So the programmed starting, where you can monitor the current and you can monitor the speed and feed it to a computer, and computer will automatically feed signal to these electronic converters. So slowly a controlled starting is possible throughout the process. Okay. So you are actually, to understand this, you can use the same the torque speed characteristic as follows. So this is the nominal at F, the frequency. If you reduce the frequency at constant flux, then it will follow some other curve. Okay. Let us say this is F1. Let us say this is F2, maybe F3, and F4, like that. Okay. So F4 is less than F3, less than F2, less than F1, less than F. So you go on, because synchronous speeds will change. Therefore, you will change. You are going to shift from one character to another character as you change the frequency, right? So this is how the speed would go on changing. Initially, if your load characteristic is like this, so you will notice that throughout you have a very high accelerating torque. Okay, you have accelerating torque like this. So you can have a high starting torque also. You can have a good starting torque by having low frequency. Maybe 5 people are claiming even you can start from 1 hertz. Some of the manufacturers today come and tell you can start the motor even from 1 hertz to 50 hertz. So that means slowly you can start. So this is one of the more popular method because of the developments in power electronics. Okay. Okay, let us now all these methods that we have so far studied belong to squirrel cage motors, because they are all you have done all the controls from stator side. All the methods that you have so far discussed are with stator side only. On rotor side, you can do it if you have a slip ring motor. Therefore, this is also very commonly used because in slip ring motors are used in heavy duty high power drives like cranes, hoists, lifts and so on. There also you require a good controlled starting. There you use two methods. One is called a balanced rotor resistors. You connect at the slip rings balanced resistors, or you can connect unbalanced resistors. Two methods are being used. You can have balanced resistor, rotor resistors, or unbalanced rotor resistors. You can also use rotor impedances. You can have an RL combination also. Resistor inductors are also, but it's not very common, but sometimes it may be used also. It may be not only a resistance starting but also impedance starting. Okay. And often you use liquid resistors. By liquid resistors are that way you can control the height of the dip. You have some electrodes dipped into a liquid, so resistance of that can be changed. And you can also have inductor or rheostats. So you can have inductors also and rheostats. These are all liquid resistors, inductors, resistors are used. Now to understand this quickly, we already studied this earlier, that by changing the rotor resistance, you have a family of characteristics, isn't it? High rotor resistance means you can have a good starting torque. Here, this we have done in the earlier lectures. Then if you reduce, let us say you start here, so you have a very high accelerating torque, then you again disengage certain portions, you go to this rotor resistance, then you go to this rotor resistance, ultimately you remove all the external rotor resistance, so you are going to change from one characteristic to another throughout the starting process. Therefore, this way you can have a rotor resistance starting way for slip ring machines. So this is one of the methods which are used. Okay. This is one of the circuit for connections of slip ring machines. So you have the slip ring machine here. Stator is connected to the mains. This is the supply. And the rotor, you have these resistors. You have these contactors which will cut off the resistors like this, several of these, by closing these contactors. Okay. If you close this contactor, it is already full speed. This contactor, that means you short circuit here. If you close it here, you short circuit next one. So sequentially you have several of these things closed. For example, first it may be starting, this total resistance will come. Next you close this, these two resistance will come. Next you close this, only this is shorted. So this way you have a graded starting by cutting off resistors by suitably closing the contactors. Okay, here. Then you can also, of course, you can also have you start like this. This is the main. If you close this, the motor starts, and then you start this. Then this contactor is for forward rotation. Of course, there is also a kind of reverse rotation. You can run in both directions. Because this is called a overcurrent relay. Whenever the current exceeds, this will cut it off. Okay, this is one of the standard starter for a slip ring induction machine. To conclude, you must have seen that most of the motors have starters, right? No motor in practical use is directly wired to the supply. there is in between a small box is sitting, which is called a starter for the motor. So that starter will invariably incorporate the several methods which we have so far discussed, depending upon the application and the method used. Okay. So the starters and contactors will have the following functions, right? If you open up a starter, it will have a jumble of various circuits will be there inside. It will have a mechanism to start, right? Start means usually you start with pressing a green button there, okay? And if you want to stop, you press it by red button, okay? Therefore, but there are sometimes, you know, when you put the red button, it may just disengage the supply. But there may be sometime you want to quickly stop. There may be some braking action also. So this may be green and this may be red. That means it will also have braking, right? There are several ways of braking the motor, quick stopping of the motor. Then you should also see that there is a overcurrent protection. The starter invariably will have a, if a current goes very high for a long time, then it disengages the supply. So to protect the motor. And there will also be under voltage protection. If the voltage goes below certain value, which considerably happens in many of the remote or rural power supplies, voltage may go, instead of 415 is the nominal value, it may go below 300. So that it is unsafe for the motor to operate at so low voltage. So there will be a overcurrent protection and under voltage protection. Then the motor is protected, means the supply is disconnected. And there will also be a thermal protection. They use normally some device called thermistors, which has resistance sensitive to temperature, okay, a negative resistance in a way. Now that means that is also connected in the supply. So whenever the temperature goes beyond certain levels, it will disconnect. So these protections are there inbuilt in a starter and the contactors. And most of the contactors are still electromagnetic or electromechanical contactors. Because nowadays solid state contactors are also being used. So these are some of the concluding issues connected with starting of motors. Okay. Now the next we will take up the next topic for discussion, that is testing of motors. Okay. Now why testing? Okay, sometimes you go to a doctor, you want to be tested. Okay. Why do you go to a doctor? You feel you are not well. You want to ensure your performance and your status and your condition. That is why you go to. So testing, same thing will be motor. It is you want to ensure its performance. So it's called a one thing is performance assessment. You do testing, okay, and you also do testing for parameter determination, right? You would like to know, you have done modeling, you know equivalent circuit, you would like to know what are the values of those equivalent circuit parameters. So these are the main purposes for which testing is done, because it has to satisfy certain standards. There are some standards of professional societies, and the manufacturers, even a customer would like a certificate, test certificate. Before you buy, you demand from the manufacturers what is the test certificate. So only when you are sure that testing is done properly, okay. So if you are a customer, you should know what tests manufacturer should know. So testing knowledge is required both for the manufacturer and the consumer or the customer, okay. Now next question is, let us say equivalent circuit parameter, that is the first thing. Equivalent circuit parameters you want to determine from conducting suitable tests. Now are these parameters constant? We assume that equivalent circuit, all the parameters are constant. That's what you have assumed, right? But they are really not so, okay. Now they are not constant because they vary with operating conditions, okay. So our assumption the equivalent circuit parameters are constant was a very rough assumption, not valid. Now let us look at the stator resistance RS. it is not constant because it is affected by temperature of the winding, and it is also affected by frequency, because the frequency of current carried always affects the current distribution in any conductor. Higher the frequency, there is more non-uniform current distribution, and because there will be opposing leakage, opposing fluxes will be there, so there is some inductor effects come to the picture, right? If it is DC, current is all the electrons are uniformly distributed across the conductor cross section, but that is one of the things. Therefore, we should know how to take care of this. Okay. Then same thing with rotor resistance, rotor bars, that also will affect temperature. Okay, because rotor can withstand more temperature. If the bars or end rings are much hotter, the resistance is different. Then slip, it has a lot of bearing on the temperature. The frequency of the rotor conductor depends upon the slip. If it is starting, it will have high resistance, at running it will be low resistance. So if you are calculating the performance different speeds, your resistance may vary. Unless you take this, your calculations will be to that extent wrong. Okay, so this we should know. Next is leakage reactances, XLS and XLR. They are also not constant because they vary with current. Because the higher the current, there will be some, after all, where is the leakage flux? Leakage flux, though bulk of it is in the air, some part of it goes in iron, leakage flux. So the portion which goes in iron, if higher the current, there will be more saturation, the reactance and inductance will vary with the current. So the leakage reactance is a current dependent parameter. Okay. Same, next is magnetizing reactance. Well, let us look at the practical. Magnetizing reactance depends upon the operating flux. Again, it is not operating flux depends upon the magnetizing current. So the variation of magnetizing current and the flux and current is not linear. So if you say air gap flux, in typically, so you will find the flux versus magnetizing current will vary non-linear. This is because bulk of the portion of that flux will be in iron. If it is purely in air, it is linear. So that's why it's called air. It's not totally air gap. So higher, therefore, this is proportional to Vg is proportional to flux. Air gap voltage is proportional to air gap flux, phi SR. Therefore, if the magnetizing current is more, then your Xm may go down, because Xm is nothing but Vg by M, isn't it? Because of nonlinear relation. So the operating voltage will have a bearing on the magnetizing reactance. Okay. Then the core loss resistance RC is also dependent upon voltage, because the core loss depends upon the operating flux, and that will depend upon the flux and also depends upon the frequency. If your frequency is varying, again the RC will change. Then FW, what is FW? Friction windage loss. That is also we consider to be constant in normal, but that may vary with speed, that may vary with load. If you connect higher load, friction windage may be more. Therefore, so all these parameters which we assume constant are practically not valid. Now let us see what tests we do to take care of this. When you do testing, because in the theoretical class you assume all of the constant. When you go to the laboratory, you get upset because your meters don't work properly, your motors don't work properly, your readings don't come properly, because that is part of engineering experience. Okay? That means things should not work properly. Only then you will learn. Okay? So the testing is one of the most frustrating experience for an engineer, because things don't work properly. Okay? Therefore, what you should do? Okay? Before testing a motor, you should know what you are testing. Right? I mean, you should know what, when you are doing a motor, you should know whether you are testing AC motor or DC motor, you are testing a wrong motor. Many times it happens in hospitals. I think wrong patients are being treated. Somebody has a problem in the right eye and he is operated with the left eye. Okay? So, I mean, therefore you should be careful about what you are testing, why you are testing, who is testing, and what instruments you are using. Okay? Therefore, you should, first you do is read the nameplate. Before testing, all of you should read the nameplate of the motor, and the nameplate is like horoscope for the motor. Okay, it will tell everything, right? So what is it that it will tell you? Nameplate will tell you first the line voltage. Voltage that is given is the line voltage, not the phase voltage. So you be very clear, and it will give you the line current. Okay. Then it will also specify what is the output power. When it is a 3.7 kilowatt motor, it will give you 3.7 kilowatt output, right? So that is what you should know, okay? And then it will also tell you what is the nominal power factor. That is, it is the rated power factor, okay? It will also tell you what is the frequency of supply for which the motor is designed, okay? Then it will also tell you the connection, whether it has to be nominally connected with star or delta. That is also written on the nameplate. Accordingly, you should connect. Then it will also tell you the insulation class of insulation. It is B, class F, class H. Because accordingly, you will decide about the operating temperatures. Operating temperature is the ambient temperature plus the rise in temperature, right? So a motor, whether it used in the mountains or on the deserts, that makes a difference because of the ambient temperature difference. Okay. Then it will also tell you what is the duty for which can be used. Duty means can it be used for short time duty, or can it be used for intermittent duty or a continuous duty. So there can be a motor which will work for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and for till the motor is burnt out, it is not taken out, because continuously it is used. That's called a continuous duty. So therefore, the motor, that's also you should see. Then recently they are demanding that efficiency must be printed on the nameplate. What should be efficiency? Not only at full load but also at part loads. Say 60%, 80%, 100%. So that must be, that also is one of the factors. And lastly, they will also tell you what is the make. Make is important because after some time, you know whom to contact. That means whom to catch, right? Therefore, that is the important data. And serial number is also important, because if you tell the manufacturer a serial number, maybe he will be able to find out when it was manufactured, what was the design, because in the manufacturer they will have a design department will have the data on the designs for different series of motors. Okay, so these are of practical importance, which are not often discussed in textbooks. Okay, therefore this is it that you will have to know. So first thing you do, take a motor, first thing you would like to do is to measure the stator resistance. Okay, and that is easy, you think. Okay, now you go, what you do first is, one of the method is you can have the DC voltage current method. Apply a DC voltage to the winding of the motor and measure the current, and voltage by current should give you the resistance, isn't it? So R will be V by I. Okay, to the terminals you apply. How much voltage you should apply? Nominal voltage of the motor or less voltage? Because if it is a 415 volts nominal voltage, your DC voltage must be very small, because if you put 415 volts, your motor will burn. Okay, you are applying a DC voltage, right? So you be careful, you apply a small voltage till the current doesn't go beyond. So that is one thing that you will have to take care. The other method is, nowadays there are electronic micro ohm meters which are now marketed. So that will give you a resistance to the to good accuracy, even micro ohms. So that you can directly connect it, and it will read mostly digitally micro ohms. Okay, other methods are called the bridge methods. You must have studied somewhere what is the Wheatstone bridge. Okay, so there are bridge method. Now the Kelvin double bridge, one of the standard bridge which are used for low resistance. It is a very low resistance. You are talking of some few 0.1 ohms, 0.2 ohms, like that. So it must be accurate. Okay, because that resistance of the winding would be comparable with the resistance of the lead, right? Your lead is also low resistance and windings are low resistance. So you should be, accuracy will be affected by how much long lead you are using and what is the thickness of the terminals. Okay, these are all matters of practical concern. Okay, so if you measure resistance across the terminals R, then you are not disconnecting anything, so it will per phase resistance will be depend upon how it is internally connected, isn't it? So if it is a star connected, in star connected you have major resistance R here. So it will be RS, this will be RS. So the RS will be whatever R by 2. Don't make it R by root 3 or something like that, because this is okay. This is just 2 in series. And R, if it is connected in delta, okay, you connect across this, then what will happen? This will be R, RS, RS, RS. So it will be RS in parallel with 2 RS, right? So in that case it will be 3 by 2 R, okay, the resistance in delta. Therefore it will be 3 times that, okay. Here your R that you measure will be RS into 2 RS by 3 RS, isn't it? So it is 2 by 3 RS. R is equal to 2 by 3 RS, or RS is equal to 3 by 2 R, okay. So how you connect matters, okay. Next what you do is you also measure the temperature in which you took that measurements. You measure the temperature. Now actually if it is a hot, if the motor is hot, then temperature will be different, your RS will be different, okay. Now we can take that R hot by R cold will be T hot by T cold, but this T is in degree Kelvin. It is not in Fahrenheit or centigrade. You can say approximately. Why is it so? Say you must have, if you remember some physics, then resistance varies with temperature, okay. Let us say degree Kelvin or something. We can assume it goes linearly. This is 0 degree Kelvin. Okay. So you can say R is the, if you say this is R cold, if this is R hot, so R hot by R cold will be whatever is the T cold, T hot by T cold, okay, linearly you can. This is how it is. You have to add, if you are measuring with degree centigrade, you add 273, okay. So that is the, and you know when it goes to 0, what do you expect it to be? It is a superconductor, okay. That is one of the things people are just researching and getting a lot of Nobel prizes, and no superconducting thing has come to the, though they have built, MIT built superconducting generators in 1960 or so, and okay, they are under development, the superconducting generators, okay. Now you have done that. Now another thing is your operating frequency is AC and not DC. Therefore that is another problem that you will face, because there will be AC resistance, because non-uniform distribution of currents will be there because of AC, there will be some opposing fluxes and so on. So it will be more than RDC. So due to skin effect. So typically RAC can be taken as 1.05 RDC. I mean this is typical values you can take, okay. So to account, now you have to account for now both temperature and the frequency. To account, what are you account for? Both the temperature and the frequency. So a thumb rule is you take RAC hot equal to 1.3 times RDC cold, right. You have measured RDC cold, take it 30%. I think it is considered to be, this is how mostly in industries they take. They just take, if it is 1 ohms RDC cold, 1.3 is taken RAC hot, okay. Now this is, next test you conduct is what is a blocked rotor test, okay. In blocked rotor test, you block the rotor and measure the input voltage power at different currents till a little above rated value. That means slightly above the rated current, but at the rated frequency. This is one measurement that you do. This is called a blocked rotor test, okay. You block the rotor pass a current to the winding, but don't go beyond the rated value. Okay. Now let us see what will happen. If you have blocked the rotor, means that means you have connected this, let us say star or delta, doesn't matter. So you have measured your rotor, this is blocked. Blocked means speed is 0 and slip is 1. And you, of course, you connect some meters, watt meter, then connect some ammeter, okay, and connect some voltmeter, and of course you normally put a variac here and supply. This is a typical connection that you do for the test, which is known as a block rotor test. Okay. Now you have varied the so it is for different currents, but till the rated value. Okay. So block the rotor and measure input voltage, power at different currents till a little above rated value, but at rated frequency. Okay. Now what will be equivalent circuit under blocked rotor? Equivalent circuit under blocked rotor would be, we draw like this. Where here S equal to 1, so RR by S is very small and the XM and RC are very high, therefore we neglect that. So we only say this is your equivalent circuit, this is your equivalent circuit, RS, RR, XLS, JXLR. This will be V blocked rotor, VBL, I blocked rotor, and you will have Z blocked rotor. This will be the, because you have neglected the core loss, because that impedance is very high compared to this rotor circuit, right. Now we do some calculations from this blocked rotor test. Okay. How do you do calculations? I mean, very easy. You measure V block, I block and P block. That is the voltage, current and power per phase, okay, under blocked rotor. So it's very easy, because the P blocked rotor will be I blocked rotor square into R blocked rotor. Therefore RBL will be PBL by IBL square, and Z blocked rotor will be V blocked rotor by I blocked rotor. You have got ZR, and therefore X blocked rotor will be equal to square root of Z blocked rotor minus R blocked rotor square. This is simple. So you have got three values, you can calculate the impedance, it is not a big deal. Okay. Now what is that these impedances mean? Okay. What is R blocked rotor will be now? What is R blocked rotor? So it will be RS plus RR, isn't it? Therefore that is from this circuit which we have got, R will be RS plus RR. Okay. Therefore R blocked rotor will be RS plus RR, and what will be X blocked rotor will be sum of the two leakage reactances. Okay. So XLS plus XLR. Now generally you take XLS equal to XLR is equal to X blocked rotor by 2. For rotor is referred to stator turns. So you have now been able to, but you know RS by that earlier measurements, so you can find RR. Okay, this is one thing you will find, because knowing R blocked rotor and RS you can find RR, and X blocked rotor you can find XLS, XLR. So you have found out both the things. So you are able to determine all the parameters of the from the blocked rotor test. Okay. I mean, this is similar to short circuit test in transformers. Okay. So you have calculated these parameters. Then what will be the phasor diagram under blocked rotor test? You have the V blocked rotor, and somewhere I blocked rotor. Okay. Now it will have this will be IR, this will be IX, and this will be, let us say, phi blocked rotor. Power factor under blocked rotor will be tan inverse of X by X blocked rotor by R blocked rotor. This is a standard, you can say, is a phasor diagram under blocked rotor condition. Okay, very simple. Okay, we have seen what is the equivalent circuit, what is the phasor diagram, how you can calculate. Okay, so next is you do tabulation of the results. What you do is you find out what is the IBL, blocked rotor current. Say blocked rotor current you can save, let us say 0.1 per unit to go up to, let us say, 1.1 per unit. Right? You vary the blocked rotor current, and then you find out the blocked rotor voltage, then blocked rotor power, then ZBL, RBL, XBL, RR, and XLS and XLR. So this is a simple, you can calculation you can do either by your calculator or by a program, and you can have a variation of these things. Okay. Now lastly you have to plot the results. Okay. What results that you will plot? You will plot R and X with current. Now X is X blocked rotor and R blocked rotor. X blocked rotor will be generally expected to be drooping with current. R blocked rotor also you expect it to be constant, but it is possible it may go slightly higher because it might have reached some temperature. This will be R blocked rotor. Okay. So this is so you will have an idea of the leakage reactances for different currents. Therefore, if the motor is operated different times, leakage reactance will be different. This is only a way we can calculate the parameters. So to sum up, we have now discussed about the initial portion of testing that you do when you purchase a motor. Take the nameplate, measure its resistance, and next conduct a blocked rotor test. And next class we will take up no load test and see how other parameters can be determined and how the performance can be obtained. We'll stop it here at this stage.